Jane is pretty uncomfortable throughout this whole shopping experience. She doesn't like that Mr. Rochester wants to buy her so much. She convinces him just to buy her 2 dresses instead of 6. She then convinces him, instead of like fancy purple and silk fabrics, to just get gray and black. And she kind of talks him down. But the same thing happens at the jeweler's shop. He keeps trying to buy her all of these things, and she feels annoyed and degraded. When I was in 12th grade and I read this for the first time, I was totally perplexed as to why she would not just accept all of these nice gifts from the man who loves her. But in Jane's mind, and I could now say, my present day self would say, in Jane's mind, it's creating this uncomfortable sort of power dynamic where Mr. Rochester is able to get her all of these nice, fancy, expensive things, and she's not able to return it. So one of the things that was part of his proposal, and that she said also, was the fact that they were equal and they had been on a level. They had been talking to each other as people who respect each other and are on equal footing, intellectually, all of these other things. They had a sense of equality. Mrs. Fairfax early in the chapter points out some other things where they're unequal, and now this wealth issue is coming more to the forefront. So Jane feels uncomfortable because she can't return any of these things that Mr. Rochester's giving her. She can't likewise spoil him. But then she remembers what Mrs. Reed said about her uncle on her dad's side, John Eyre, who lives in Madeira. And she says, oh, why don't I write to him? He offered to adopt me and make me his heir. Why don't I write to him? That way at least she could have something. She'd have some sort of her own money, her own funds. She wouldn't be totally dependent on Mr. Rochester. They'd be a little bit more on equal footing, even if she doesn't have quite the same level of wealth that he does. So she decides to write to her uncle, let her know who she's marrying, that she's getting married, and then ask for some sort of allowance money of her own that she can spend as she chooses. And then Mr. Rochester's holding her hand, and then she gets kind of annoyed because of all of these factors. And she says she crushes his hand, which was ever hunting hers, and throws it back to him. So she's not even holding his hand right now. She's very unsettled by all of these things, little things that have been building up. Little things, but which may hint at larger issues. You need not look in that way, I said. If you do, I'll wear nothing but my old Lowood frocks to the end of the chapter. I'll be married in this lilac gingham. You may make a dressing gown for yourself out of the pearl gray silk, and an infinite series of waistcoats out of the black satin. So she tells him that she doesn't want him to be look that way. Like, she doesn't want him to be that upset all the time about it. She says if he keeps kind of like pouting, basically that she will wear what she has forever, and that he can take the fabrics he bought her and make clothes for himself out of them. He chuckled. He rubbed his hands. Oh, it is rich to see and hear her, he exclaimed. Is she original? Is she piquant? I would not exchange this one little English girl for the Grand Turk's whole seraglio, gazelle eyes, houri forms, and all. So then he says, oh, Jane is so original, and he wouldn't exchange her for a whole harem full of women. The Eastern allusion bit me again. I'll not stand you an inch instead of a seraglio, I said, so don't consider me an equivalent for one. If you have a fancy for anything in that line, away with you, sir, to the bazaars of Stamboul without delay, and lay out in extensive slave purchases some of that spare cash you seem at a loss to spend satisfactorily here. And what will you do, Janet, while I am bargaining for so many tons of flesh and such an assortment of black eyes? I'll be preparing myself to go out as a missionary to preach liberty to them that are enslaved, your harem inmates amongst the rest. I'll get admitted there, and I'll stir up mutiny, and you, three-tailed bashaw as you are, sir, shall in a trice find yourself fettered amongst our hands. Nor will I, for one, consent to cut your bonds till you have signed a charter, the most liberal that despot ever yet conferred. I would consent to be at your mercy, Jane. I would have no mercy, Mr. Rochester, if you supplicated for it with an eye like that. While you look so, I should be certain that whatever charter you might grant under coercion, your first act, when released, would be to violate its conditions. Why, Jane, what would you have? I fear you will compel me to go through a private marriage ceremony, besides that performed at the altar. You will stipulate, I see, for peculiar terms. What will they be? I only want an easy mind, sir, not crushed by crowded obligations. Do you remember what you said of Celine Barons, of the diamonds, the cashmeres you gave her? I will not be your English Celine Barons. I shall continue to act as Adele's governess. By that I shall earn my board and lodging, and 30 pounds a year besides. I'll furnish my own wardrobe out of that money, and you shall give me nothing but, well, but what? Your regard, and if I give you mine in return, that debt will be quit. Well, for cool native impudence and pure innate pride, you haven't your equal, said he. We were now approaching Thornfield. Will it please you to dine with me today? He asked, as we re-entered the gates. No, thank you, sir. And what for, no thank you, if one may inquire? I have never dined with you, sir, and I see no reason why I should now. Till what? You delight in half-phrases. Till I can't help it. Do you suppose I eat like an ogre or a ghoul, that you dread being the companion of my repast? I have formed no supposition on the subject, sir, but I want to go on as usual for another month. You will give up your governessing slavery at once. Indeed, begging your pardon, sir, I shall not. I shall just go on with it as usual. I shall keep out of your way all day, as I have been accustomed to do. You may send for me in the evening when you feel disposed to see me, and I'll come then, but at no other time. I want a smoke, Jane, or a pinch of snuff to comfort me under all this. And then he says to her, steady me, as Adele would say, and unfortunately I have neither my cigar case nor my snuff box. But listen, whisper, it is your time now, little tyrant, but it will be mine presently, and when once I have fairly seized you, to have and to hold, I'll just, figuratively speaking, attach you to a chain like this, touching his watch guard. Yes, bonny wee thing, I'll wear you on my bosom, lest my jewel I should tine. He said this as he helped me to alight from the carriage, and while he afterwards lifted out Adele, I entered the house and made good my retreat upstairs. So a lot going on, a lot of back and forth, and a lot of it is kind of like flirtatious and joking and playful. But first, Mr. Rochester says, what would you do if I bought a whole harem? And then Jane says, well, I would go as a missionary and I would preach independence to all of the women in your harem, and then we would overthrow you. So it goes on through like a whole little playful thing, but a pretty brave figurative plan that she comes up with. And then she says that she doesn't want to be like the Celine Baron, so she doesn't want him just to spoil her and then to have a meaningless relationship. She says that she's going to keep being Adele's governess, that way she could earn her own money. And then she says they'll just, he'll give her his regard and she'll give him his. They'll respect each other and be on equal footing. And then they get back to Thornfield and he asks if she'll eat with him tonight, and she says no, that she hasn't eaten with him before they were engaged, so until they're married she's going to continue not eating with him, but she'll see him after dinner as they have in the past. He duly summoned me to his presence in the evening. I had prepared an occupation for him, for I was determined not to spend the whole time in a tete-a-tete conversation. I remembered his fine voice. I knew he liked to sing. Good singers generally do. I was no vocalist myself, and, in his fastidious judgment, no musician either, but I delighted in listening when the performance was good. No sooner had twilight, that hour of romance, began to lower her blue and starry banner over the lattice, than I rose, opened the piano, and entreated him, for the love of heaven, to give me a song. He said I was a capricious witch, and that he would rather sing another time, but I averred that no time was like the present. Did I like his voice, he asked. Very much. I was not fond of pampering that susceptible vanity of his, but for once, and from motives of expediency, I would even soothe and stimulate it. Then, Jane, you must play the accompaniment. Very well, sir, I will try. I did try, but was presently swept off the stool and denominated a little bungler. Being pushed unceremoniously to one side, which was precisely what I wished, he usurped my place and proceeded to accompany himself, for he could play as well as sing. I hied me to the window recess, and while I sat there and looked out on the still trees and dim lawn, to a sweet air was sung in mellow tunes the following strain. The truest love that ever heart felt at its kindled core, did through each vein in quickened start the tide of being pour. Her coming was my hope each day, her parting was my pain. That chance did her steps delay was ice in every vein. I dreamed it would be nameless bliss, as I loved love to be, and to this object did I press, as blind as eagerly. But wide as pathless was the space that lay our lives between, and dangerous as the foamy race of ocean surges green, and haunted as a robber path through wilderness or wood, for might and right and woe and wrath between our spirits stood. I dangers dared, I hindrance scorned, I omens did defy. Whatever menaced, harassed, warned, I passed impetuous by. On sped my rainbow, fast as light, I flew as in a dream, for glorious rose upon my sight that child of showering gleam. Still bright on clouds of suffering dim shined that soft solemn joy. Nor care I now how dense and grim disasters gather nigh. I care not in this moment sweet, though all I have rushed over should come on pinion, strong and fleet, proclaiming vengeance sore. Though haughty hate should strike me down, right bar approach to me, and grinding might with furious frown swear endless enmity. My love has placed her little hands with noble faith in mind, and vowed that wedlock's sacred band our nature shall entwine. My love has sworn with sealing kiss, with me to live, to die. At last I have my nameless bliss, as I love, loved am I. So Jane wants him to sing, she accompanies him, but she doesn't play well enough, and Mr. Rochester pushes her out of the way and says that he'll accompany himself. And then he starts to sing this song that's about two people in love, and there's all these obstacles and things in the way of them getting in love. And finally, at the end of the poem, despite all of these hardships, they're going to be married, and then at the end he wins his nameless bliss, as I love, loved am I. So the speaker of this poem is loved as much as he loves the other person. Related. He rose and came towards me, and I saw his face all kindled, and his full falcon eye flashing, and tenderness and passion in every lineament. I quailed momentarily, then I rallied. Soft scene, daring demonstration I would not have, and I stood in peril of both. Weapon of defense must be prepared. I wetted my tongue. As he reached me, I asked with asperity, whom was he going to marry now? That was a strange question to be put by his darling Jane. Indeed, I considered it a very natural and necessary one. He had talked of his future wife dying with him. What did he mean by such a pagan idea? I had no intention of dying with him. He might depend on that. So Jane doesn't want all this intense romance just yet. So she decides that she has to kind of fend him off. So she's going to say something sarcastic. So she says, "Oh, who are you planning to marry? You talked about in the song your wife dying with you, and I'm not going to die with you." And he did. My love is sworn with sealing kiss, with me to live, to die. So she says, "I'm not promising that." Oh, all he longed, all he prayed for, was that I might live with him. Death was not for such as I. Indeed it was. I had as good a right to die when my time came as he had, but I should bide that time and not be hurried away in a suttee. Would I forgive him for the selfish idea and prove my pardon by a reconciling kiss? No, I would rather be excused. Here I heard myself apostrophized as a hard little thing, and it was added any other woman would have been melted to marrow at hearing such stanzas crooned in her praise. I assured him I was naturally hard, very flinty, and that he would often find me so, and that, moreover, I was determined to show him divers rugged points in my character before the ensuing 4 weeks elapsed. He should know fully what sort of a bargain he had made, while there was yet time to rescind it. Would I be quiet and talk rationally? I would be quiet if he liked, and as to talking rationally, I flattered myself I was doing that now. So again, she's really just kind of teasing him with all of this. And he says, "Oh my gosh, anyone else would have melted if they heard such a beautiful song." And she says, "No, I'm naturally hard and stubborn, and you're gonna have to deal with it. And now you have time to reconsider your proposal." Again, it's like that playful tone to everything. He fretted, pished, and pshawed. Very good, I thought. You may fume and fidget as you please, but this is the best plan to pursue with you, I am certain. I like you more than I can say, but I'll not sink into a bathos of sentiment. And with this needle of repartee, I'll keep you from the edge of the gulf too, and moreover maintain by its pungent aid that distance between you and myself most conducive to our real mutual advantage. From less to more, I worked him up to considerable irritation. Then, after he had retired in dudgeon quite to the other end of the room, I got up and saying, "I wish you good night, sir," in my natural and wonted respectful manner, I slipped out by the side door and got away. The system thus entered on, I pursued during the whole season of probation, and with the best success. He was kept, to be sure, rather cross and crusty, but on the whole I could see he was excellently entertained, and that a lamb-like submission and turtle-dove sensibility, while fostering his despotism more, would have pleased his judgment, satisfied his common sense, and even suited his taste less. So Jane knows that if she just kind of gave in to all of the romantic stuff, that he would probably not like it as much as their funny and cute little banter and the teasing. In other people's presence I was as formerly deferential and quiet, any other line of conduct being uncalled for. It was only in the evening conferences I thus thwarted and afflicted him. He continued to send for me punctually the moment the clock struck 7, though when I appeared before him now, he had no such honeyed terms as love and darling on his lips. The best words at my service were provoking puppet, malicious elf, sprite, changeling, etc. For caresses, too, I now got grimaces. For pressure of the hand, a pinch on the arm. For a kiss on the cheek, a severe tweak of the ear. It was all right. At present, I decidedly preferred these fierce favors to anything more tender. Mrs. Fairfax, I saw, approved me. Her anxiety on my account vanished. Therefore, I was certain I did well. So now Mrs. Fairfax is seeing, because Jane's kind of keeping him at a distance and continuing to tease him and kind of keeping up some of her regular routines, Mrs. Fairfax is feeling more reassured and better about their engagement. Meantime, Mr. Rochester affirmed I was wearing him to skin and bone and threatened awful vengeance for my present conduct at some period fast coming. I laughed in my sleeve at his menaces. I can keep you in reasonable check now, I reflected, and I don't doubt to be able to do it hereafter. If one expedient loses its virtue, another must be devised. Yet, after all, my task was not an easy one. Often I would rather have pleased than teased him. My future husband was becoming to me my whole world, and more than the world, almost my hope of heaven. He stood between me and every thought of religion, as an eclipse intervenes between man and the broad sun. I could not in those days see God for his creature, of whom I had made an idol. So she really does love Mr. Rochester, continues teasing him to the end of that chapter, but that last paragraph is a little bit, it has a little bit of a different tone. It's not quite so playful. It's a little more serious than their banter and their dialogue. So she thinks that she could not see God for his creature, so she can't see God or higher power because of basically Mr. Rochester. And she kind of makes him into an idol. So she's solely focused on Mr. Rochester, and he's really like taking up her own world, which is not a quite so positive way to end. But that is the end of chapter 24.